Good evening, Neurodivergent Nation. Normally I come to you with a little bit more lighthearted video. I try to educate using humor, things like that. This time it's a little more serious. You may have already heard that the United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson was fatally wounded. This person who carried out the crime did something that's left the entire world speculating about his motives. He wrote on the shell casings, "Deny, defend, and depose." And while in no way do I condone the violence toward him or anybody else, this shooting has intensified the spotlight on the deep frustrations and anger that so many in our country have with health insurance companies, including United Healthcare. Millions of Americans, like me, are extremely frustrated with the health insurance companies. And this is a topic that I personally and professionally feel very deeply about, and I've been greatly and negatively affected by. I have too much experience dealing with insurance companies who've made it so impossibly difficult to treat people in the best manner possible, and they're making what I believe are unethical decisions to make more money, and it's costing people their lives. At the very least, it's costing us all thousands of dollars extra every year as we try to navigate through the ridiculous, nonsensical barriers to receiving the best health and mental health treatment. This shooting that just happened, it underscores the angry, frustrated boiling point that many Americans are at with insurance providers who are often seen as gatekeepers to essential care, imposing what many see as unnecessary, carefully planned, intentional barriers to receiving care while preventing clinicians like myself from being fairly paid for their services or paid at all. These meticulously designed systemic failures not only inflate healthcare costs for everybody, but they also disproportionately harm marginalized people, like us neurodivergent people, creating a moral and a social crisis that only really negatively affects us, not the insurance companies. For most Americans, health insurance is not optional, it's a necessity. In fact, it was even the law under President Obama. Yet, paradoxically, insurance itself is a significant driver of mental health inflation. Hospitals, psychologists, mental health treatment centers, and other providers inflate prices, knowing that insurances will not only negotiate discounts, but they will also put up a fight in paying for some of the vital life-saving services and treatments. Let me give you a quick real-world example, and I'll try to stick with what I know from my experience as a mental health provider. As a clinician, I choose not to be in network with insurance companies, which means I'm not agreeing to their demands anymore. And someone, if they choose to see me, the insurance company may not cover any of it because they only want you to see the clinicians who are in network, who have basically signed away their rights, and your rights, by the way. Or they may say, well, we'll only cover 50%. But that rate is still usually whatever they decide they want to pay, 50% of 128 or 78 or half if the person's expected to pay the other half. So this is the way it's always been, right? Medical facilities and providers, they often just see it as the cost of doing business with insurance. And it's largely just accepted in the medical and the mental health field. Mind you, they don't like it, but it's just a reality of accepting insurance in our industry. The insurance companies are Goliaths, and we clinicians often feel completely unable to make any difference as a lowly single provider or a small clinic. So we just accept their horrendous treatment of us and our patients. But if you want to know something about me, at one point I had to employ 3 full-time people just trying to deal with insurance companies and their BS games. And we were a small clinic with just a few providers. But I had to rent more office space for them and pay for them and all the associated expenses that come with that. And our overhead shot up to hundreds of dollars per hour. Again, we were a small clinic too. But I shouldn't have to hire 3 people to navigate the constant games and barriers that insurance companies throw at us every day. That's ridiculous. Because of that, our rates had to go up, but again, the only ones who paid the inflated rates were cash pay clients who didn't use their insurance because the insurance companies paid us whatever the hell they felt like paying. I didn't think that was fair. That's why I stopped accepting insurance altogether and brought all my rates down. And yes, other clinicians think I'm foolish for charging so little, but guess what? By not accepting insurance, my overhead went way down and I can actually make my bills finally with less stress. But people who rely on insurance are hurt by this. But insurance companies, they love it because I'm one less provider that they have to pay. So they make more money by making services less accessible to people like you with insurance. You see how that works? The worse the insurance companies behave and the harder they make it for you and I to work with them, the more money they make. So, this means that they are greatly incentivized to make life a living hell for you and me. You see, this problem creates a two-tiered system where those without coverage face astronomical bills, overpaying for services, while the insured must navigate a minefield of out-of-pocket expenses, co-payments, ever-changing tricky rules, fine print that only serves the insurance company, paying ridiculously high deductibles, and ultimately overpaying for services that insurances should do better covering. A 2022 study by the Kaiser Family Foundation revealed that 41% of insured adults delayed or skipped care due to costs, and they're insured. This reveals an underlying contradiction because isn't insurance existing to protect us against financial ruin? Yet it often exacerbates economic vulnerability, which can lead to financial ruin. So, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. So think about my friend who pays $2,400 a month to insure his family because he's self-employed. He's self-employed because he's neurodivergent, because he needs a very flexible schedule. So essentially, he's punished by the insurance industry because he's not part of a big group, because he is a neurodivergent person and doesn't work for other people. He's self-employed. I know an awful lot of neurodivergent people who are self-employed, including myself, who get completely screwed by their own insurance companies. I have another good friend. She's a psychologist, and she owned a medium-sized clinic. They served thousands of people, many autistic people. She was recently put out of business because of an insurance company. Now, my friend, she did nothing wrong. She was audited by the insurance company, which is fine, that happens. But an audit costs the clinic so much money and time they could be helping people. But instead, they have to provide thousands of documents to be scrutinized for any paperwork errors, missing codes, or anything else they feel doesn't fit the mind of a person doing the audit. And if the auditor hasn't had their coffee that morning, or their life hasn't felt the fiery darts of love in a while, they're feeling a bit bitter, they can really make an audit even worse than it needs to be. She spent so much money on an attorney trying to get through this audit, but that audit went on for so long, like more than a year, that it financially suffocated my friend and her partner's clinic, and they had to close the clinic. What does that mean? That means dozens of clinicians lost their job, more than 1,000 people no longer could get services there, and the insurance company was able to not pay out a ton of money that they owed. And essentially, they could then move on to shut down the next clinic that had the audacity to serve people's mental health needs and accept insurance. For rude, right? Everyone lost here, except the insurance company. They won big time. One less clinic means less access to care, which means less money the insurance company has to pay out. Then she called the insurance commissioner for the state to complain about this unfair, unethical treatment to her and the clinicians and the patients. And the insurance state commissioner said that she needs to hire an attorney because the state insurance board doesn't do anything about this. So by the way, the story and many other stories like this, real stories by real clinicians, can be found in the link below in the description because a journalist is now digging into why insurance companies are screwing over clinicians and people so badly. Speaking of which, insurance companies owe me so much money that we simply couldn't collect on, even though the insurance companies admitted they owed us the money, that I nearly went out of business myself. And to be honest, after all the hell I've been through, I still may have to shut down my clinic too. Because it's not just about the money. It's about the hundreds and thousands of hours that we've had, that basically we've spent trying to fix claims that weren't actually bad, and trying to figure out why they changed the payment amount from what was contracted, why they denied claims that they previously approved, trying to figure out what happened to the payments they said they sent 2 months ago, etc., etc. And this is just me. I'm just one clinician. Most clinicians who've accepted insurance have horror stories like mine and many more. Check this out. I got a story for you. Check this out, real quick one. I provided over $15,000 worth of counseling to a family over a few years, and the insurance company kept denying the claims but telling me that they were going to pay. We just needed to fix a little something. So I continued to see the family because they said, hey, I'm going to get paid for it. After more than a dozen hours on the phone, they told us that our biller sent the claims to the wrong location. So we're like, okay, our bad. We fixed it. We resent the claims to the place they told us, who then told us, no, you sent it to the wrong location. Send it back to the other place, which we sent the first time. Then they tell us to change a part of our address on the claims because a letter or something was not the way it was inputted several years earlier. So everything had to be exact from every single thing. Then they tell us, oh, so now you have to resubmit it, which we did. And then they told me, oh, you waited too long to submit the claim. And I'm like, you told me to. So it escalated higher and higher to a person who tells me that it's all weird. We should have been paid years ago. Yeah, I know. And they'll get to the bottom of it and then they'll call me back. Well, we never get that call. And I've been told that so many times, more than a dozen times. Then we have to start it all over again with a new person until I threatened legal action. And suddenly, now they want to come make it right. And I get someone from that department, and essentially, it all starts over again. We stopped counting the hours we spent trying to collect on this one family after spending more than 20 hours talking to people at the insurance company. It's been 4 years now, but now it's personal. So I'm not giving up. This freaking sucks. But this is just one of many, many, many experiences we have had at my clinic. Hell, once we found, you're going to love this, once we found that an insurance company forged the signature of one of my providers on a new contract that okayed the insurance company to pay this clinician even lower rates than before. It took us 2 months of us badgering them to get them to send us a copy of that contract. And not only was it not the clinician's signature on the contract, but whoever forged it spelled the clinician's name wrong too. So we contacted the state insurance commissioner about this fraud, and guess what they said? They said, oh, I'm sorry, we don't get involved in this type of thing. You need to get an attorney. Then what the freak do you do, state insurance commissioner? What do you do? I'll tell you what they do. They take very, very large campaign donations from insurance companies to get reelected as state insurance commissioner. Now, if that isn't a bunch of bullshit, I don't know what is. I don't know who I'm kidding, expecting things to be different. Do you think an insurance commissioner is going to look into the mistreatment of my friend's clinic or my clinic by insurance companies if those same companies are donating millions to their reelection campaigns? They certainly don't seem to care about my insurance problems in my small clinic or anybody else I know either. One of the most infuriating aspects, though, of insurance is the denial of claims. It's ridiculous. I just heard with this whole shooting ordeal that UHC denied like a third of the claims or something like that. I don't remember. You'll have to look it up. But I can't tell you the number of patients that received legitimate approvals for services only to have them later denied after the service has already been provided by my providers and the bill is sent to the insurance company. This practice is common and particularly egregious in mental health care, where insurers often demand access to all confidential therapy notes to determine medical necessity. Did you know that, by the way? So the person deciding whether or not you need therapy or an assessment who's never met you or the treating clinician, who may not even have a background in this, is going to decide whether it was necessary for you to get that treatment that you already got, even if your doctor referred you to that treatment because in their professional opinion they thought you needed it. This is an invasion of privacy, and it undermines the trust between patients and providers, forcing clinicians to weigh ethical considerations against patients' access to care. Did you hear what I said? Insurance companies have the right to demand to see all your private therapy notes. I don't know if you knew that or not. It is true. Most of them do that. Mental health services are uniquely impacted. Psychological testing, for instance, is often pre-approved only to be denied afterward based on arbitrary criteria that doesn't make any sense. This costs clinicians so much money that, as discussed earlier, some have gone completely out of business because of it. For neurodivergent individuals seeking autism or ADHD assessments, these denials can delay critical diagnoses and interventions, potentially worsening outcomes. Insurance policies and their methods, they're notoriously convoluted. From cryptic terminology to frequently changing plan features, to changing phone numbers so you can't easily get back to the same department that helped you before. This happens to us all the time. We'll call up, be like, okay, so I spent 2 hours trying to figure out who to call. I finally got the right department on the line. What's the phone number? We write it down. We call 2 weeks later. It's a totally different department. Insurers appear to intentionally make them policies tricky and nonsensical with phone trees that lead you in circles till you give up. Isn't that the goal for them, right? Frustrate and confused patients are left deciphering opaque language, only to discover that treatments that they assumed were covered are subject to exceptions or exclusions that are buried in the fine print. And maybe it's not in the print at all. They just arbitrarily decide, nah, we're not going to cover this. See, this creates a frustrating scenario where even well-informed individuals struggle to navigate their basic coverage. So listen to this part. For individuals with disabilities like ADHD or autism, this complexity is particularly punishing. See, the executive functioning challenges that we have can make it nearly impossible to keep up with the demands of filing claims or appealing denials or even clearly understanding policy changes. And it has nothing to do with how smart you are or how well you read or anything else. I have a doctorate degree and I can't sit and read their BS policy details. It's punishing. I'd rather take an ice bath. No offense, Wim Hof. It's uncomfortable though. This effectively creates an unequal system where some disabilities are easier to manage within the constraints of insurance bureaucracy than others. While it's rare, acts of violence linked to frustrations with insurance reflect the deep anger that many people feel. Remember the movie John Q with Denzel Washington? John, the father of a dying boy, takes an emergency room hostage to secure a life-saving heart transplant for his son when his insurance fails to cover the operation. This movie resonates so well with the public because the movie captured a universal sentiment: desperation in the face of uncaring, unfair, unequal systems. Real-life examples abound, from patients threatening legal action to tragic confrontations like the United Healthcare CEO shooting. Think about it. This insurance company, lots of insurance companies, have billions of your dollars, high profits each year. Super smart people working for them and hundreds of people dedicated just to figuring out how to maximize profits and decrease payouts. But they can't seem to figure out which place I should send a claim to. They can't keep a phone number the same. They think they know what's best for your health care. Behind every statistic lies a human story. Consider the case of Michaela. She's a mother of an amazingly hilarious autistic teen who had her son assessed based on the recommendations of school counselors and teachers, as well as his personal physician and their mental health therapist. They fought for 3 weeks prior to the assessment just to make sure it was covered by insurance. They just wanted to make sure because they couldn't afford to pay out of pocket. Once the assessment was complete and submitted to insurance, guess what? Oh, surprise, surprise. The claim was denied. I saw it coming. I saw this so much, I knew it was coming. This denial either leaves the mom on the hook for the full amount or me on the hook as a clinic owner for it, not getting paid, despite paying employees and rent and testing supplies, etc., to get the assessment done. It cost me a lot of money to provide an assessment. I didn't think that was fair, so we appealed. Guess what? The appeal was denied. No idea why, though. They didn't tell us. We spent hours and hours on the phone trying to figure out why it was denied. We couldn't get anywhere, so we let the mother go after answers. She got an answer after months. They wanted another form filled out. That's it, just one more form. And this is a form we have never had to fill out before for this insurance company or any other, but she filled it out anyway. We looked it over. It was all correct, so we sent it in. Denied again. Another month of calls from us and from her, and we got nowhere. Eventually, despite following every procedure and dozens of hours of office work trying to get this paid, we just had to give up. We lost a lot of money on that. Not only the amount we lost doing the assessment, but more than $1,000 in time trying to chase these answers down. And there are another 100 examples like that to go with it. And then there's Jace, a veteran who sought ADHD treatment, only to have his therapy notes subpoenaed by his insurance company. They wanted to read all of his therapy notes to see if he actually needed therapy. I had to actually call up and talk with a doctor that works for the insurance company whose job it is to go over the notes and determine if there's medical necessity. Guess what? Surprise, surprise. That's sarcasm, by the way. The doctor, in his medical opinion, ruled that Jace did not need therapy and that they were now going to take back money that they'd already paid me for months of therapy. Who pays for it then? Jace, the unemployed veteran? Nope. I eat it. Thousands and thousands of dollars gone. I don't know about you, but I can't afford to lose thousands of dollars. Just last year, one insurance company clawed back over $3,000 out of my bank account without explanation, meaning that the money just disappeared from my bank account and I was left trying to figure out who took it and why. The bank was no help, so we called the insurance company and we got hung up on. We called back and we left messages. We called and emailed and we called again and left more messages and emailed. No return calls, not a single one. No information. can't even get to talk to a person at this cut-rate government-subsidized insurance company known for paying so poorly that hardly anybody will even take their insurance. I gave it a shot. We took it. I lost. Not doing it again. And this is just me. Now multiply my stories by thousands and thousands of providers, doctors, massage therapists, occupational therapists, etc., etc. These stories are not anomalies. They are not the exception to the rule. They are the rule, and they're emblematic of an industry prioritizing profits over people. The psychological toll of dealing with insurance companies cannot be overstated. Studies have shown that individuals navigating insurance disputes report higher levels of stress, anxiety, and depression. This is particularly troubling for those who already seek mental health care, as the very system designed to facilitate the recovery instead becomes a source of additional trauma. Insurance companies often position themselves as partners in health, yet their actions suggest they are the adversaries. Practices such as denying claims for pre-approved services, demanding invasive documentation, and changing coverage mid-year, they erode public trust. Again, critics argue that these are not isolated issues, but systemic tactics designed to minimize payouts. The industry's reliance on opaque algorithms for claim approvals further complicates accountability. Patients and providers are left in the dark about the criteria used to deny coverage, making appeals processes confusing and exhausting. And if someone is neurodivergent and has difficulty with these things, it's pretty much impossible. What I mean is that neurodivergent individuals face unique challenges within the system. When I say unique, I mean completely unfair, which leaves us at a severe disadvantage. We all know that ADHD and autism can impair executive functioning. It can make it harder to adhere to insurers' labyrinth of requirements. But it creates a system of de facto discrimination where individuals with certain disabilities are less likely to access their entitled benefits. People, I'm talking to you now, my neurodivergent friends, and I do consider you friends. We're part of our own neurodivergent nation, and we must defend ourselves from these injustices. If you will help me, I have some possible solutions. While challenges are immense, several actionable steps can address these systemic failures. The first thing I suggest is policy reform. Now, the reason I'm telling you, I'll tell you why I'm telling you this in a second, because we can actually pull together and make a difference here. Policy reform needs to happen. Enforce regulations requiring plain language explanations of benefits and coverage terms. I believe insurance companies need to speak normal people language, not stuff only lawyers understand. The language needs to be understood by somebody with a 6th grade education, which is a pretty widely recognized standard for newspapers, etc. Why can't insurance companies do that? They're smart, they're rich, they can do this. But really, are we going to read the policies even if they're written in understandable language? I'm not. We all watch videos nowadays. I love explainer videos, by the way. They need to provide information via video. I know that sounds like a joke, but it's not. It needs to be easy to understand language and something we can see. We need to have them prohibit invasive practices and ban insurers from requesting therapy notes or other sensitive documents as a condition of coverage. I am no longer under contract with any insurance company any longer because they continually withheld payments for no good reason and continually required my confidential therapy notes from their sessions. That shit's got to stop now. The next thing is they need to expand accessibilities, mandate accommodations for individuals with disabilities, such as simplified claims processes and case management services. Basically, if you're autistic or have ADHD or other diagnoses that may make it more difficult to try to sit down and read a horribly boring and confusing long contract with lawyer speak, they have to simplify your experience. They also have to increase transparency. We need to require insurers to disclose the criteria for claim approvals and denials, making the process more predictable and fair. And it needs to be in clear, understandable language, and maybe through an explainer video. That'd be great. We need stronger oversight. We need to establish independent bodies to adjudicate disputes, reducing the power imbalance between insurers and patients. And these independent bodies must not be elected or paid for by an insurance company. So here's what I suggest. Write a letter to your congressperson. I know, boring. I know it just went on. The boring alert went off. But the only way we can get these changes enacted is to stand up to them And that means getting laws passed that make them treat us fairly. This only happens when you write a letter to your state and federal congressional representative and senators. You can use this template that I've got below. It's on my website also. I have a letter that I wrote to my state senator and representative and U.S. senator. If you want, you can use this as a template, as a framework, and you can change it, add, or delete to make it your own. Send it through the mail or email them or call them and leave a message, whatever it takes. You may just see one of us testifying to Congress about this at some point. In conclusion, there is a need for ethical reform. The healthcare system's reliance on insurance is deeply flawed, prioritizing profit over patient well-being. While acts of violence like the United States healthcare CEO shooting are horrific and should never happen, they highlight the urgent need for systemic change. Insurance companies must be held accountable for their unethical practices, and reforms must prioritize accessibility, transparency, and fairness. Only by addressing these structural issues can we restore trust in a system that millions rely on for their health and well-being, hell, for their lives. This is a neurodivergent doctor, and I hope this helps you in your neurodiverse universe. Back here, this is a really cool organ. I'm really into old things, by the way. This organ is from the late 1800s. Check this out. This lady right here, she's the one who owned it originally. We bought it off a person. Hester, her name was Hester. She was the first organ owner, this organ's owner. And what you do is you can't see it, but there's some pump footy pedals here, and you press those and it pushes air through it. And these little organ stops here give it a little oomph. But anyway. You can hear it go wah wah with my pumping. Anyway, super cool.